Hey guys, it's 0 to 9 and welcome to my workflow workshop. In this workshop, we will talk about a very important topic, which is creating the right workflow to work efficiently. And that's probably one of the most underestimated topics in music production, because a lot of people just think if they can make professional tracks, then they will get a professional producer. But the reality is, if you want to be a professional music producer, you have to make sure that you can create tracks on a very consistent basis. So that means if you are just releasing 3 tracks every year, you will probably have a very hard time to become a professional music producer. And so you have to make sure that you're able to produce a lot of tracks, and this workshop will help you achieving that goal. So that's why I've called it How to Become a Music Production Machine. And yeah, let's dive into it. So here's the agenda for the workshop. I first will talk a little bit about creative versus technical work and what's the difference and how to approach it. Then we will move on to how to organize your time, because that's a very crucial point, that you work really efficiently. And then the next point is organizing your tools, because to work very efficiently, you have to organize your tools to get the most out of them. And the last point, we'll talk about my personal 5 steps to creating a fully completed track. So let's dive into the first point, which is creative versus technical work. So a lot of you probably already know that the human brain kind of has different parts where different tasks are kind of processed. So one part of the human brain is like doing more the creative tasks, and the other part of the brain is doing the more technical tasks. And that's why it's very important to keep that in mind, because we want to get the most out of our brains and to get the best results. And a few examples for creative work is, for example, like creating melodies, bass lines, chord progressions, drum patterns, or just in general complete song ideas. So this is the typical creative work in music production. Then on the other hand, we have the technical work, which is stuff like sound designing, processing chains, synth presets, and of course mixing and mastering. So this is a very technical stuff. And to get the most out of our time, we have to try to don't mix technical with creative work too much to get the best results. Because the problem is, if you're, for example, doing creative work, you're kind of like creating melodies, and then you say, okay, yeah, but I want to do some sound design to get the right sound. The problem is then you're like switching your brain from using the creative part of your brain to using the technical part of your brain. And once you're using the technical part of your brain, it's often hard to switch back to the creative kind of part in your brain. And then usually the creative flow is kind of interrupted, and this is not very good. So that's why I recommend you guys that you try to split the creative work from the technical work to get the most out of it. And that leads us to the next point, which is organizing your time. And as the first point already says, it's very important to like organize your time correctly and do the specific tasks in a specific time, but don't mix them up too much. So, for example, if you want to start a new track idea, then it's good to have a few hours so that you can make sure that you can do a complete track idea in that amount of time. And usually, for example, I recommend to have 2 or 3 hours, or probably even a little bit more, to make a new track idea. And if you don't have enough time and you have just 1 hour, then probably it's better to don't start a new track and instead just do a technical task, because the difference between the creative and technical tasks is that the technical tasks, you can just split them in short amounts of time, and you can just do 1 hour here and 1 hour there. But with the creative tasks, it's better, for example, to work on one track idea just for one amount of time, for let's say 3 hours. You do the track idea in these 3 hours, and then you're done. And then you can move on either to the next track idea, or you can do a technical task. But with creative tasks, it's better to do them at once, to finish that task and then move on to the next task. But with technical task is a little bit different. For example, a good example is if you're mixing a track, it's not really necessary to mix mix one track all in one go. It's no problem that you just mix in one session, just mix your drums, in the next session mix your synth sounds, then you do the effects and vocals, for example, and it's not really relevant that you do it all in one go. But with the creative tasks, it's a little bit better, or I would definitely recommend it to do it like this and to just finish them in one go. And yeah, that's the most important point here, so that you try to split it. And for example, if you are coming after work at home and you know you have just 1 hour or even less and to work on music, then just do a decision and say, okay, then I will just do a technical task. For example, I will make some new synth presets, I will do some drum sound design, or I will just mix on one track you haven't finished yet. And then it's usually better. And if you say, okay, right now I have a lot of time, for example, it's weekend and you have several hours, then you can start a new track idea and just finish one track idea, or even do several track ideas in one day. And one final tip is please don't mix and master very late at night, because I know a lot of you guys probably come home very late, but the problem is if your ears are already very exhausted, and then in most cases you're doing wrong decisions in your mix or in your master, and if you come back on the next day, wake up early and check your mix or your master, then often you're saying like, okay, what the fuck did I do last night? And that's just the problem, is because if you're really exhausted, or if your ears are exhausted, then sometimes you just can't hear it right and you're doing wrong decisions. It just sounds different because your ears are so exhausted. And that's why I recommend to do very critical mix and mastering decisions when you have some good fresh pair of ears. Okay, let's move on to the next point, which is organizing your tools, which is as important as organizing your time, because probably a lot of you guys are not full-time music producers. I'm also not a full-time music producer. I also have like a main job where I'm working full-time, and I just work on music in the evening or on weekends. So it's very crucial that you use your time wisely and most efficiently. And that's why you have to organize your tools so that you can work really fast in the time you have. And the first step is to organize your sound library or your sample library, so that all the samples you have, for example, drum samples or synth one-shots, vocals, whatever it is, you have to organize them in a specific way so that it's very easy for you to find your samples quickly. For example, you can do just a basic folder structure where you have like a drum folder, then you have some subfolders with snares, kicks, claps, and you have a synth folder, a vocal folder, and just organize the way you can find it, everything very quickly. You can also use plugins. There are some like AI plugins which are able to kind of categorize your samples into different like groups, and some of them work really well. So if you're very lazy and you don't want to do it all manually, you can also try out these plugins. Maybe some of them work really well for you, and then you can just use one of them. But in any case, you have to like create a structure which makes it very easy to find a specific sound. Then the next step is organizing your plugins, similar to your samples. A lot of you guys probably have a lot of third-party plugins, and sometimes it's really annoying to browse through the plugins and find the one you're looking for. So in Ableton Live, for example, we have these collections where you can just drag and drop different plugins into different collections. For example, I have collection for VST synths, I have a collection for mixing plugins, and I have a collection for mastering plugins. So I already have my plugins in place, so I can quickly find them without looking through all of my plugins. And then you can also create a library with synth presets, because in a lot of synths we already have a lot of good presets, but usually it's like very annoying to find them, and basically you can't remember them anyway. So what I'm doing is I just browse through the presets, and if I find one I like, I also do some processing, for example like EQ or saturation, and try to get a good sound out of it. And then I will just group it to an instrument rack, and then I will save this instrument rack to my library and just give it a name, so I know it's, for example, it's a bass sound and it's a hard bass sound, or like just name it so that you can remember what kind of sound it is, and then I will save it to my library. And the same with processing chains. You can also, like if you have, for example, a specific chain for your drum bus or for your mix bus, or like for processing synth sounds, you can also save these kind of audio effect chains to your library. And that's also what I do. All my kind of racks that I'm building for like stereo widening, synth processing, drum processing, I will just save them to my library so that I don't have to recreate them all again. And this saves a lot of time, because if I'm creating a new track from scratch, I can just drag and drop my racks and have everything in place. And that makes it really easy to create new tracks from scratch, because I have all my like synth presets in place. And if I know I need an ARP sound, I need some leads, I need a bass sound, I can just find the one which is like the one I'm looking for, drag and drop it, and keep moving on with my creative flow. And the same for template projects. Maybe some guys of you are already using template projects. Template projects are really handy. For example, if you also have different genres you're working in, you can make different templates, for a template for techno, template for tech house, template for deep house, whatever you're doing. And you can already load up your favorite samples there, favorite VSTs, and have everything in place. And then when you're trying to make a new track idea, you can just start off with that template, and then you have loaded up, for example, specific drum sounds already. You have your favorite synths in place already, and you don't have to start with a blank project. And this is really helpful, because let's say you're starting a new track. You're gonna need some drums and you're gonna need some synths. So in my template project, for example, I have a very basic like kick loop with offbeat hi-hat, some rides, 16th hi-hats already loaded up in the project, so that I can just play the drum loop and play some melodies over it. This is really handy, and I will explain a lot more about these individual topics in some additional videos. So today we're just kind of having like a basic overlook over the whole workflow topic. All right, and then the last point, which is the 5 steps to creating a track. So basically, creating a track is a very big task. It takes up a lot of time. So it's better to split this big task into some smaller tasks and then do them individually. So the first task, and probably one of the most important tasks, is of course creating the idea for your track. So that means creating the bass lines and melodies, programming the drum patterns, or recording the vocals, or even writing the lyrics for your vocals if you have any. Because if you're doing genres which heavily rely on vocals, then often you maybe even start with writing the lyrics and recording your vocals and then doing the instrumentals on top of your vocal. But in techno, most of you guys probably do techno or something similar to techno. We don't have a lot of vocals, or if we have vocals, it's usually we have some basic loops or just the same word repeating or simple phrases. So the drums and melodies are usually more important. And you can see also that the kind of first step is the creative step. So this is also why you have to kind of split it in different tasks, because the first task here is the creative task, where we're really trying to create a new song idea. And then if you're finished with that, you can just save that idea to your library, and then you can check all your ideas and choose the one you like the most. And then let's say you want to finish this track, you can move on to the next step. And the next step is sound design and sound selection. And maybe just to let you know, during the first step, I would recommend that you don't do the technical tasks and just focus on the creative task, like writing the melodies, doing the drum patterns, and just go with basic drum presets, basic synth presets. So just as a kind of placeholder that they are playing a similar sound, and all these sounds don't have to be the final sounds. Just use them so that you can bring down your idea into your DAW and then save it. And if you decide that this track is really good and you want to finish it, then you can do the second step, which is sound design and sound selection. And then you can really find the perfect drum sounds, the perfect kick sounds for this track. You can program your leads, your synth sounds, choose a bass line sound or whatever it is. And this is then done in the second step. And once you are happy with all your sounds and the sound selection, you can move on to the next step, which is arrangement. And with arrangement, I mean just to set up the basic structure. So you kind of make the whole 6-7 minute tracks in techno, for example. So you lay out the complete arrangement from intro to the first break, first drop, second break, second drop, and the outro, for example. And you can also start to work on the transitions to add some elements, for example, like white noise risers or downlifters, uplifters, reverse crash or crash cymbals, to like kind of make the track flow a little bit better. And once you have like your basic arrangement and you've worked a little bit on the transitions, you can start with the next step. And the next step is mixing and fine-tuning. So you can fine-tune all your transitions. You can work on the automations of your synth, for example, automating the cutoff, or the decay of your filter envelope and stuff like this, to make your transitions smoother, and so that your track is flowing and like has a bit of movement. And then you can start to mix all your individual tracks, do some group processing, and just like kind of finalize the whole track so that it sounds good to your ears and that the track is flowing very well from start to finish. And once you're done with this, you can start mastering. And a lot of you guys probably say, okay, I'm not doing the mastering. I will send it to an external mastering engineer. But still, this is of course valid. And also a lot of releases from myself are mastered by external master engineers, because if you send them to a label, most labels will say, okay, send the pre-masters because they will take care of the mastering. But anyway, it's good if you at least know how to do a basic mastering for a specific reason. The first reason, which is probably obvious, is because the labels want to hear a kind of finished product already, even if they're doing their own mastering. If they listen to the demos, they want to hear a professional sound. And if you are just sending your pre-master, a lot of times they will just skip it, because if you think about it, the A&R from the label is listening to specific demos, and then a few tracks are mastered, so they're a lot louder, and then you send your pre-master, and then they say, oh, this is very quiet, and they have to turn up the volume a lot, and then on the next track, which is probably mastered again, they have to turn down the volume all the time, and then they are just lazy and don't want to spend a lot of time for each track, of course, because they're getting hundreds every day. So the case might be that if your track is very quiet and not mastered, they would just skip it. So I would always recommend to have a basic mastering chain, so at least that you get into a kind of competitive loudness area where they will listen to it. And mastering and mixing is sometimes a little bit overlapping, because some steps in mastering can also be done in mixing. For example, if you have to fix a specific frequency area, you have, for example, like a little bit too much low mids, then of course you can fix it in mastering, but it's always better to fix problems in the mix. That's why mastering, even doing a basic mastering, can sometimes help to identify problems you haven't heard in the mix. Because if in the mastering stage, if you're boosting the volume a lot and you apply a lot of limiting and compression, then specific frequency area will get boosted and some will get limited, and so the volume or the frequency balance will change during mastering. And that's why it's often a good idea to just quickly enable a simple mastering chain to know how your mix sounds after all this compression and limiting has been applied. And sometimes the frequency balance will change a bit, and you can always fix that also already in the mix, so that then if you're sending this mix to a mastering engineer, it's already correctly balanced and the mastering engineer has not to fix a lot of problems. And mastering in general for me is basically like 3 steps. Of course, there are sometimes different steps to do, but if I'm mastering my own tracks, I will try to fix all the issues in mixing and don't do a lot of fixing in mastering, and just apply some kind of frequency balancing, so that the final frequency balance is very on point, and so that I have enough low end, I have enough high end. I will check if my low mids are not overpowering the mix, or I have enough compression. And then I will do some coloring, and with coloring I basically mean like saturation. I will use different saturator plugins like console emulation, tape emulations, and all that stuff to give the mix like kind of color, like an analog color. And in also stereo widening is something which you might have to do in mastering, depending on how much you did already in the mix. And of course, then the final step is loudness, to get your mix to your target loudness level, so that's in a competitive area and can like you are in the same ballpark as professional artists. And it does not mean that you have to like hit the same volume level or loudness level as the pros are doing, because if you're not a professional master engineer, chances are that you can't get it as loud as the pros. So this is not a big issue, even if you have like 1 or 2 dB less loudness than professional tracks. It's still good enough to send it out as a demo. And if you want to release the track on your own, you can still hire a professional mastering engineer if you're not like good enough at mastering, or just you want to have something, listen to your track and get the best result. That's absolutely no problem to send it to someone else. But anyway, I would recommend to at least try to get a basic mastering, because it helps you to identify problems you haven't heard in your mix. And it's also good to send a kind of master track as a demo to labels, because then chances will be higher that they will listen to it. All right. So that are the 5 steps to creating a track. And so we are already finished. Thanks for watching. I will also make a lot of additional videos about all these topics. So I'll make additional video about organizing your sample library or creating synth presets, how you can organize your plugins. And all about that stuff. And you can find also mixing videos or mastering videos on my channel. So if you wanna keep up to date, make sure to subscribe, because then you will always be informed when new videos will show up. And yeah, let's see you in the next videos where we'll dive a little bit deeper into all these workflow topics. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Ciao, bye bye.